Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to dive deep into the exact molecular and systemic mechanisms that govern your physiology, your performance, and your recovery. Now, we aren't just going to talk about basic habits today, like drink more water or go to bed early. No, we're actually going to deconstruct the human body from the microscopic cellular level all the way up to the macrosystemic level to really understand how you can engineer true biological resilience.
For practically all of human history, we believed that our internal organs and cellular repair processes were just entirely out of our control. We thought they were governed completely by this autonomous system just running in the background while we went about our day. But what if that wasn't entirely true? What if you actually held the steering wheel to the unconscious systems keeping you alive? Today, we're embarking on a pretty amazing journey to understand exactly how you can intentionally manipulate your own biology.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the autonomic control board.
Right at this very moment, there is a constant biological tug-of-war happening inside your body. It's between two branches of your autonomic nervous system. On one side, you've got the sympathetic nervous system. That's your internal gas pedal, driving your fight-or-flight response. On the other side is the parasympathetic nervous system, your physiological brake pedal. True health isn't about cutting the brake lines or entirely eliminating the gas pedal. It's really about how efficiently you can apply those brakes. So let's look at exactly how this brake pedal works at a cellular level. When your brain determines that you are safe, it shoots an electrical signal down the vagus nerve. This nerve then drops a chemical messenger called acetylcholine directly onto your heart's pacemaker cells. Think of this molecule like a key. It physically unlocks these specific M2 receptors on the surface of the cell. And when those locks open up, potassium ions just flood right out of the cell, changing its electrical charge. The physical result of all this chemistry is that your heart literally slows down and beats more efficiently. You are quite literally consciously manipulating your cellular chemistry.
Moving on to Section 2, the biomarker of resilience.
So you might be wondering, how do we actually measure this internal state? Well, we look at the microscopic space between your heartbeats. That brings us to heart rate variability, or HRV, and specifically a highly precise metric called RMSSD. Now, this isn't just about what your heart rate is. It's about the microscopic fluctuations in time between consecutive beats. A lot of people think a perfectly steady heartbeat, like a ticking metronome, is a good thing. But actually, that indicates stress and a really rigid nervous system. High variability, which is measured by a high RMSSD score, indicates a flexible, highly adaptable system. Simply put, RMSSD is the ultimate objective biological proxy for your autonomic resilience, your recovery status, and honestly, even how well you're aging. And here's the crazy part. The vagus nerve alone drives a massive 75% of your restorative parasympathetic activity. It is the absolute primary superhighway connecting your brainstem directly to your heart, your lungs, and your gut. So when you wake up and see a high RMSS score on your wearable device, you are quite literally looking at the strength, the tone, and the activation of your vagus nerve. Which brings us to Section 3, sleep architecture and recovery. So when does this parasympathetic system do its absolute heaviest lifting? It actually happens when you're completely unconscious. Circadian biology and your sleep stages fundamentally dictate your baseline autonomic reserve. During slow-wave sleep, what we commonly call deep sleep, your sympathetic nervous system is heavily suppressed. This is your ultimate parasympathetic reset. Your blood pressure drops, your heart rate bottoms out to its lowest point, and this amazing process called glymphatic clearance physically washes metabolic waste right out of your brain tissue. It's like a biological power wash. Without getting adequate slow-wave sleep, your nervous system essentially remains trapped in a state of sympathetic dominance, which just bleeds into the next day as chronic stress. But here is where we tend to completely sabotage our own biology, 39.2%. That is the truly shocking amount by which a high intake of alcohol can suppress your overnight HRV-derived recovery. Make no mistake, alcohol is an absolute autonomic wrecking ball. As your body is scrambling to metabolize that ethanol, it triggers a massive sympathetic stress response. Just look at this dose-dependent cost. Even a microdose, we're talking literally just one standard drink, suppresses your physiological recovery by over 9%. If you push that to a high dose, your recovery drops nearly 40%. Alcohol elevates your resting heart rate, it blunts the sensitive baroreceptors that regulate your blood pressure, and crucially, it actively suppresses that deeply restorative slow-wave sleep we just talked about. So your brain might feel like it's peacefully passed out, but on a cellular level, your nervous system is basically running a marathon all night long. Let's shift gears a bit. Section 4, Cardiac Remodeling and Exercise. Beyond sleep, how you apply physical stress fundamentally engineers your nervous system. And the biological trade-offs here depend entirely on the intensity. Let's contrast Zone 2 aerobic training with high-intensity interval training, or HIIT. Zone 2 training happens at a lower intensity where your cells are relying on mitochondria to burn fat. Because the systemic stress is relatively low, it causes something called eccentric hypertrophy, meaning it actually stretches and enlarges the chambers of your heart so it can pump way more blood per beat. This massively increases your resting HRV and parasympathetic tone. HIIT, on the flip side, relies on anaerobic glycolysis. It floods your body with lactic acid and catecholamines. Now, this builds incredibly strong, thick heart walls. That's concentric hypertrophy, but it triggers a massive sympathetic shock to your system. So while HIIT absolutely builds peak fitness, it carries a massive autonomic recovery cost. Zone 2 is what builds the physiological foundation that actually allows you to recover from that cost.
Next up, Section 5, the science of thermal hormesis. One of the most fascinating ways to force a positive adaptation in your nervous system is through hormesis. That's where a controlled, acute physical stressor stimulates a robust, disproportionately positive adaptive rebound in the body. When you submerge yourself in ice water, you are taking your nervous system on a wild ride. In the first 10 seconds, that cold shock triggers pure sympathetic panic. You're hyperventilating, your blood vessels are clamping shut, adrenaline is just spiking. But if you stay in and control your breathing, right around the 60 to 90-second mark, something incredible happens. Cold receptors on your face and body stimulate the trigeminal nerve, and that triggers the ancient mammalian dive reflex. Your body essentially realizes, oh, wait, we're not dying, we're just submerged. So it forcefully applies the parasympathetic brake to conserve oxygen, rapidly slowing your heart rate down. Then, when you finally get out, the sympathetic stress recedes, and you get this massive parasympathetic overshoot.
And the data on this is honestly just staggering. A structured, chronic protocol of cold exposure literally trains your nervous system to habituate to stress. Over a period of weeks, your baseline autonomic balance permanently shifts toward vagal dominance. The research shows a 25% increase in high-frequency HRV power and a massive 34% increase in your baseline RMSSD. You are literally expanding your body's cardiovascular shock absorbers.
Finally, let's look at Section 6, engineering vagal tone. Okay, so we've looked at sleep, exercise, and cold. But what if you need to downregulate your nervous system right now, sitting at your desk in the middle of a stressful day? Let's map out some highly specific, immediate interventions. First, paced resonance breathing at roughly 6 breaths per minute phase locks your heart rate to your breathing, maximizing gas exchange and heart rate variability. Then there's transcutaneous auricular vagal nerve stimulation, or TVNS. This uses microcurrents on the ear to directly stimulate vagal pathways to the brain, which research shows can actually prevent age-related autonomic degeneration. But honestly, the most accessible, powerful tool you have is simply the geometry of your own breath, specifically prolonged exhales.
The crucial point to understand here is this. Breathing is both voluntary and involuntary, and that makes it the ultimate biological backdoor into your autonomic nervous system. See, when you inhale, your heart rate naturally speeds up to circulate oxygen. But when you exhale, your diaphragm moves up and your vagus nerve is physically stimulated, releasing that relaxing acetylcholine we talked about earlier, which physically slows the heart down. So by simply making your exhales twice as long as your inhales, you are biologically forcing your nervous system to apply the brakes.
If you take nothing else away from this explainer, let it be this core thesis. The vagus nerve is the main driver of your parasympathetic nervous system, and crucially, you can stimulate it on purpose, whenever you want to. Your autonomic nervous system isn't actually entirely autonomous. It's this highly sophisticated feedback loop that is constantly scanning your environment, your behavior, and your breath, and it is actively waiting for your input. Through Zone 2 cardio, protecting your slow-wave sleep from alcohol, embracing the cold, and mastering your exhalations, you are no longer just a passenger in your own body. You now understand the molecular cascades, the objective biomarkers, and the environmental triggers that govern your exact biological state. You have the exact blueprints to build a nervous system that is capable of absorbing immense stress and bouncing back even stronger. The science is clear, the mechanisms are mapped out, and the tools are entirely in your control. So the only question left for you is, now that you hold the keys to your own autonomic nervous system, how will you engineer your resilience?